Voices for Justice is a podcast that uses adult language and discusses sensitive and potentially triggering topics, including violence, abuse, and murder. This podcast may not be appropriate for younger audiences. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Some names have been changed or omitted per their request or for safety purposes. Listener discretion is advised. My name is Turney, and this is Voices for Justice. As is our annual tradition, today I'm discussing 2024 case updates, specifically in the cases of Asha Degree, Ayla Reynolds, Margarita Sandoval, Harmony Montgomery, Jesse Wilson, Abby Williams and Libby German, Maddi Kingsbury, Morgan Nick, Kaysera Stops Pretty Places, and Mercedes Vega. Now, I want to take a second and explain how this is going to go. I'll be discussing cases in order of when I covered them on the podcast. I'll give you the episode number and the air date so it's easy to find if you want to go back and listen to the full episode or episodes. But I will be giving you a short summary of each case before getting to the update. So if you haven't listened to a particular episode or you just aren't familiar with the case, you'll still know what's going on. But without further introduction, these are our 2024 case updates. Our first case update comes from episode 16. That first aired on April 28, 2021. That is the case of Asha Degree. Asha's case is undoubtedly one of the most discussed in true crime, and the internet absolutely exploded when there were updates in her case this year. As a refresher, Asha was 9 years old when she went missing from her home in Shelby, North Carolina in the middle of the night on February 14, 2000. She was last seen by her family at about 2:30 in the morning, just asleep in her bedroom. But she was later seen by multiple drivers walking along Highway 18 around 4 a.m. One of these drivers did go back to the area to check on Asha, but said that by then she disappeared into the nearby woods. She was reported missing by her parents less than 3 hours later at 6:30 a.m. There were no signs of forced entry at Asha's home, and it appears that she left on her own for some unknown reason. In 2001, her backpack was found double-bagged in garbage bags and buried along Highway 18 along with some of her belongings. There were also some items in the backpack that her parents say did not belong to Asha. In 2016, the FBI announced that they received a tip that leads them to believe Asha may have gotten into an early 1970s Mark Lincoln 4 or Thunderbird along that same highway, Highway 18. Then, on September 11, 2024, reports began to surface of a heavy police presence at a property in Shelby. There were multiple agencies present along with dogs. But what really seemed to get everyone excited that there might finally be some answers in her case was a green car being towed from the property that may match the car the FBI reports Asha may have gotten into on the morning she went missing. In total, they searched 5 properties across 3 different counties. Authorities aren't saying much about what was taken from these properties, but they did confirm that no remains were found. Of course, everyone wanted to know what sparked this. Why are these properties being searched nearly 25 years after Asha went missing? Well, it seems that warrants were drawn up after DNA samples from Asha's recovered backpack were linked to a man named Russell Underhill and a woman named Anna Lee Dedman Ramirez. A hair found on Asha's undershirt was linked to Anna Lee. According to the search warrants, 2 of the properties searched belonged to Anna Lee Dedman Ramirez's parents, Roy and Connie Dedman. It appears that Anna Lee was just a teenager when she lived on the property in 2000, the year Asha went missing. As for the other DNA sample and Russell Underhill, it appears that he was a former resident of a nursing home owned by the Dedmans and has since passed away. But in the warrants, investigators make it clear that Roy and Connie Dedman are the common links in this development. Roy Dedman's attorney says that the family is being cooperative and is not involved in Asha's disappearance. But according to 2024 court documents, police do believe Asha was killed, her body was concealed, and that her murder may be linked to the Dedman family. However, Asha's case is still unsolved. And if you have any information, they're asking you to please call the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. at 704-484-4756. Our next update is from episode 33, which originally aired on August 25th, 2021, the case of 20-month-old Ayla Reynolds from Waterville, Maine. According to Ayla's father, Justin DePietro, on December 16th, 2011, he put her to bed at 8 p.m., and when he woke up, she was gone. Her case quickly became the largest search for a missing person in Maine history. Justin and his family have said that they believe Ayla was abducted. However, law enforcement quickly dispelled this theory and accused Justin and those in the house the night Ayla went missing of knowing more than they were sharing with investigators. Ayla was declared legally dead in 2017, and in 2018, her mother, Trista Reynolds, filed a wrongful death suit against Justin. Justin's mother, Phoebe, and sister, Alicia, were later added to the lawsuit as well. And that's really where the case was when I brought it to you 3 years ago in 2021. But as of September 2024, the lawsuit has been settled. As with many civil lawsuits, the exact terms have not been released, and both parties have entered into confidentiality agreements as a condition of the settlement. But the lawyer for Justin's mom and sister, Laura Mayer, told News Center Maine that they do dispute the claims made in the lawsuit, but have decided it was in their best interest to settle the case. I know it's not the most satisfying update because so little is known, but I hope that this development has brought some semblance of peace or justice or answers to Ayla's mother and loved ones. And because Ayla's case has never been adjudicated criminally and is seemingly still open and unsolved, I will say that if you have any information about Ayla, please call the Maine State Police Major Crimes Unit at 207-624-7143. The next update is in the case of 19-year-old Margarita Sandoval from Norman, Oklahoma. She was featured in episode 54 on January 13th, 2022. Margarita went missing in 2018, and in May of 2021, her body was found in a box belonging to her brother Octavio Sanchez in a basement. Margarita's case is definitely one of the most devastating I think I've ever covered. She had intellectual disabilities and needed full-time care. Beginning in January 2018, her brother Octavio and his wife Desiree were supposed to be providing that care. But Margarita had seemingly gone missing sometime between February 17th and April 18th, 2018. She would have been 18 or 19 depending on the date that actually occurred. Police still aren't sure. But after receiving a tip in the case in 2021, the police found Margarita's body in a basement in Norman, Oklahoma, inside of a container that had been wrapped in plastic. When I first covered Margarita's case, everything pointed to Octavio and Desiree killing her. They'd been cashing Margarita's Social Security checks up until the week before she was found, collecting nearly $31,000 total. They were giving conflicting stories, and Octavio knew the owner of the home her body was found in. When the owner of the home, Miguel Munoz, was questioned, he said the box belonged to his friend Octavio and he was unaware of the contents. However, Munoz would later tell investigators that he knew there was a body inside the box, but he didn't think it was Margarita. Octavio told him it was the body of a pedophile, and that Octavio said, quote, "Desiree started it, and I had to finish it," end quote. The couple was later arrested in 2023. Then, in January 2024, Desiree Sanchez, Margarita's sister-in-law, was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder, with an additional 5 years for unlawfully removing a body. Her sentences will run consecutively. Later that same month, Margarita's brother Octavio entered a blind plea of guilty to manslaughter. Basically, a blind plea means that he entered this without any type of agreement and doesn't know what type of sentence he'll be given. Of course, because of the guilty plea, there was no trial. According to reporting by News 9, he did change his plea to no contest to manslaughter shortly before he was sentenced to life in prison in May. Our next 2024 update comes in the case of 7-year-old Harmony Montgomery from Manchester, New Hampshire. She was featured in episodes 68 and 69 on May 12th and 19th, 2022. When I first told you about Harmony's case, we knew that she went missing sometime in late 2019, but wasn't reported missing until about 2 years later in 2021. Her case made huge waves in the media, and it was eventually revealed that through a series of mistakes, oversights, and really just mishandling of her case within the Division of Children, Youth, and Families, Harmony was placed with her father, Adam Montgomery, without the proper oversight shortly before she went missing. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you probably know that I used to work within the foster care system. I have a really special place in my heart for these kids that have these cases mishandled and end up missing or dead. So I go really deep into all of that in the episodes if you want to learn more about exactly how this happened. But within about a month of Harmony's case making national headlines, the reward for information about her grew to $144,000. Her case was everywhere, and people were justifiably outraged. A few days later, both Adam and his girlfriend, who had been living with him and Harmony, were arrested on charges that were related to Harmony's care and welfare, but not her disappearance. Harmony's remains have not been found, but it seemed very clear that either Adam, Kayla, or both were involved in her likely murder. And in January 2023, Adam was arrested for second-degree murder. Now, while authorities were building their case against Adam and Kayla, they were both arrested on a variety of other charges for things like fraud, theft, and weapons-related crimes. So Adam was already looking at spending decades in prison. But the trial for Harmony's murder didn't begin until this year, which is where our updates in this case start. It was a pretty devastating and graphic trial. But Adam's lawyers heavily argued that while he did help conceal Harmony's body, it was Kayla that last saw her alive, while the prosecution argued that Adam killed Harmony after he became angry that she'd soiled herself while they were living in their vehicle. Finally, on February 22nd, Adam Montgomery was found guilty on all charges, while Kayla Montgomery was given heavily monitored parole. In May, Adam was sentenced to 56 years in prison and Kayla was released. But that same month, Harmony's birth mother, Crystal Sorey, asked the court to legally declare Harmony dead, stating that she intended to file a lawsuit against the state and the State Department of Health and Human Services and the Division for Children, Youth, and Families. And in September, that's exactly what she did. Like I discuss in my episodes about Harmony, Crystal also argues that DCYF was negligent and liable for what happened to her. Crystal also organized a search for Harmony's remains in Mary O'Malley Park in Chelsea, Massachusetts. As of recording this episode, it doesn't appear that they have been located. But I really hope 2025 is the year Harmony can be respectfully laid to rest. Our next update is in the case of 10-year-old Jessie Wilson from Buckeye, Arizona, who was featured in episode 86 on October 4th, 2022. Jessie was reported missing from his home in Buckeye by his adoptive mother, Crystal Wilson, in July 2016. She called the non-emergency line to say that he left out of his bedroom window in the middle of the night, like he'd done many times before, but this time he didn't come back. Authorities weren't able to recover any video to point to where Jessie may have gone, so they focused on about a 10-mile radius around his home. Because Jessie was so young and July is one of the hottest months in this area, easily reaching over 110 degrees, the searches for him began immediately. And the efforts were massive. There were multiple agencies and a ton of search teams out there, but they couldn't find Jessie. Pretty quickly, the focus turned to Jessie's adoptive mother, Crystal Wilson. She'd been investigated for child abuse in the past, and in 2011, the Avondale police responded to a call that her children were malnourished. When they got into the home, they found 2 boys that were about 4 years old wearing harnesses that were attached to the beds. Crystal said this was necessary so the children didn't run away. But there was food in the fridge, so no action was taken. Eventually, about 400 pages from the Department of Child Safety were released related to Jessie's care under Crystal Wilson. Like with Harmony Montgomery's case, I go deep into all of this in Jessie's episode. But essentially, Jessie was abused and horribly neglected. Neighbors reported that Jessie and his siblings looked underfed, and would often go door to door asking for food. Several of the bedroom doors in the home were also designed to lock the children inside the rooms. Crystal Wilson had at least 6 children taken from her custody before adopting Jesse and his siblings. And eventually Jesse's siblings were taken from her care as well. But for some reason, Jesse stayed with her. All eyes were on Crystal Wilson. Then, in March 2018, his remains were found about 6 miles from his home when a city employee pulled over to take a short break. It's at this point that authorities changed their statement from saying there were no suspects in Jesse's case to now saying no one has been ruled out. We also learned from the Buckeye Police Department that they wanted to present charges against Crystal Wilson for Jesse's murder shortly after he was reported missing. But at this point in 2018, Crystal Wilson has moved far away from Arizona to Georgia and kept a low profile. This is basically where my episode about Jesse ended. But just a few months after that episode aired, in December 2022, Crystal Wilson was arrested in Gainesville, Georgia on one charge of abandonment or concealment of a deceased body related to Jesse's case. It looked like there would finally be some type of justice for Jesse Wilson. But here is where the unfortunate 2024 update comes in. In March, the case was dropped after the Maricopa County Attorney's Office filed a motion for dismissal, citing insufficient evidence. But it was dismissed without prejudice, so new charges can be filed. Both Jesse's biological family and the Buckeye Police Department have publicly expressed their disappointment with this decision. So while all signs point to Crystal Wilson, Jesse's case does remain unadjudicated. If you have any information about Jesse Wilson, please call the Buckeye Police Department at 623-386-4421. Our next update is in the case of Abby Williams and Libby German from Delphi, Indiana. I discussed their case in episodes 88 and 89 on October 20th and 27th, 2022, just days before there was an arrest made in the case. I also spoke with Libby's sister, Kelsey, if you're interested in hearing what she has to say about the case. Abby and Libby's case has been one of the most discussed in all of true crime. But as a very brief refresher, on Monday, February 13th, 2017, 14-year-old Libby and 13-year-old Abby were dropped off at the Delphi Historical Trail to enjoy the unseasonably warm weather. But when it was time to pick the girls up, they were nowhere to be found and were reported missing that night. The next day, their bodies were found. They'd clearly been murdered. Because I've become so close to Kelsey, I will admit up front I am biased and this is an extremely difficult case for me to talk about. But throughout the investigation, it was discovered that Libby had very bravely taken a video on her phone showing her likely killer walking and saying the words, "down the hill." This video was shown absolutely everywhere, and the case gained a massive amount of media attention in a very short amount of time. The list of potential suspects for this case was seemingly endless, and in all honesty, it became a complete circus. There was round-the-clock coverage for this case exploring every possible angle. It felt like the whole world wanted to know who killed Abby and Libby. And like I said, just days after releasing my interview with Kelsey, a man named Richard Allen was arrested for the murders. This arrest made a lot of waves. But our case update comes from December 2024, when, after weeks of testimony, Richard Allen was found guilty of killing Abby Williams and Libby German. He was sentenced to 130 years in prison. Now that the trial's over and the gag orders have been lifted, I, for one, am really looking forward to hearing from Abby and Libby's families, should they choose to discuss what they've endured over the past, now almost 8 years since the murders. Our next update comes from episode 115, which aired on April 20th, 2023, the case of 26-year-old Maddi Kingsbury from Winona, Minnesota. As you may recall, on the morning of Friday, March 31st, 2023, Maddi and the father of her 2 children, Adam Fravel, dropped their kids off at daycare around 8 a.m. and returned home. Maddie's sister Megan received her last text message from Maddi at 8:15 a.m. Adam said that around 10 a.m., he took Maddie's minivan out for a few hours, and when he got back around 1:30 p.m., Maddi was gone. But Maddi missed work and never picked up her kids from daycare. This really wasn't like Maddi. She was a high achiever, a grad student, and a mom who was very dedicated to her kids. Everything about this situation was just extremely out of character for her, so her family reports her missing on Saturday morning. When her home is searched, they find her phone and wallet. Things aren't looking good. It's eventually revealed that Maddi and Adam were not currently in a romantic relationship, and Maddi was actively looking for a new home nearby so Adam could continue seeing the kids. But pretty soon, Adam kind of starts publicly feuding with the Winona Police Department. People want to know why he didn't attend the press conferences, and he points his finger at police while they outright deny that he was told not to attend. Now, Adam didn't actually have custody of his kids, and without Maddi there, they are removed from Adam's custody pending the investigation that was very much pointing to him being responsible. But Adam did initially try to fight this. When authorities came to his parents' house where he'd been staying with the kids, he and his family refused to let them in. And at one point, Adam took his 2-year-old son in the house and locked the door while social workers could hear him screaming inside. But of course, authorities did eventually get in. But Adam refused to gather any of the children's personal items, so they left with only the clothes on their back. They were eventually placed with Maddi's family. Over the next few days and weeks, there were many searches for Maddi that turned up empty, while Adam fought for custody of his 2 children. But before he could go to court, Maddi's body was found on June 7, 2023. A deputy was on a remote stretch of Highway 43 near the border of Iowa investigating a tip when he saw her in some brush. Adam Fravel was arrested shortly after on probable cause of intentional second-degree murder, and on June 9th, he was officially charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. It was revealed that Maddi was found with a knotted towel around her neck, and Adam had made threats to her that if she didn't listen to him, she'd end up like Gabby Petito. In October 2023, his charges were escalated to first-degree murder, with additional counts of second-degree murder. Finally, in November 2024, Adam went to trial and was found guilty in December, just a few weeks before this episode airs. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his crimes. Our next update is in the case of 6-year-old Morgan Nick from Alma, Arkansas. She was featured in episode 121 on June 9, 2023. On June 9, 1995, Morgan and her mom, Colleen Nick, were invited to attend a Little League baseball game with a few friends. Near the end of the game, Morgan went out to the parking lot to play with some of the other children. She was only out of her mother's sight for a few minutes when she went missing. Possibly the largest lead in her case was the sighting of a man in a red truck near Morgan shortly before she disappeared. Authorities quickly trace what at least appears to be a similar truck to some attempted child abductions in the area, and they identify the driver as 70-year-old Billy Jack Lynx, a convicted child predator. They arrest Lynx and impound his truck, but at this time, there's no definitive link to Morgan's disappearance. Really, Morgan's case basically sits for 26 years, until 2021, when the FBI publicly names Billy Jack Lynx as the first and only person of interest in her case. Now, by this time, his truck had been sold at auction, but investigators do track it down and try to get any forensic evidence they can. They find blood on the dashboard, blonde hair under the floor cover, and a blue-green cotton fiber in the mat under the seats and in some metal pieces of the truck. At the time, they didn't have enough DNA to make a match, but they did conclude that the fiber found was a match to the shirt Morgan was wearing the night she went missing. The trouble was, Billy Jack Lynx died in prison in the year 2000. So again, Morgan's case just sits. It seemed very clear that Billy Jack Lynx was the perpetrator. But authorities still didn't name him as her killer or even a suspect. Until October 2024. That's when the Alma PD announced that Billy Jack Links is the main suspect in Morgan's case. This happened because they finally were able to link the hair found in the truck as likely belonging to Morgan. Officially, it belonged to someone in her family, but they say the only person that could have been was Morgan. And while it may seem that this is where Morgan's case would end, the Alma Police Department has made it very clear that this investigation is still open and active as they continue to search for Morgan's remains. So, anyone with information about Morgan Nick is asked to call the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. Our next update is in the case of 18-year-old Kaysera Stops Pretty Places, whose body was found in Hardin, Montana in 2019. Her case was featured in episode 129 on August 16, 2023. On Saturday, August 24, 2019, Kaysera went out with her friends Isabella and Nakia. They end up going to Isabella's boyfriend Natosi's mother's house since he promised to buy them alcohol. They start drinking and things take a turn. Isabella and Natosi get into an argument. Natosi doesn't want Isabella to leave, but Kaysera steps in and tells Natosi to leave her alone, and the women leave the house. But Natosi came out after them, and he and Isabella continued fighting. They see a police car drive by, and since the women were drinking underage, they scatter. Nakia and Isabella find each other a short while later, but Kaysera is nowhere to be found. While they're looking for her, Natosi comes back in his truck and chases them, but they do eventually lose him by hiding in some bushes. Ultimately, Nakia and Isabella can't find Kaysera anywhere, and they leave, assuming that she'll show up in the morning. But of course, unfortunately, that isn't what happened. Kaysera never made it home, and when she was reported missing to the police, they shrugged it off. They even told her family that there was no need to search for her because she was probably just out partying. But a few days later, on August 29th, Kaysera's body was found in the yard of a home just a few houses down from Natosi's mother's house. This was immediately suspicious to basically everyone but law enforcement. Kaysera was only partially hidden, and the chain link fence faced a very busy street. Most people found it pretty hard to believe that she'd been laying there for days without anyone seeing her, and most people immediately suspected foul play. In December 2019, the Montana Medical Examiner's Office published a report stating that they could find no evidence of injury or disease in Kaysera's death, but they couldn't rule out asphyxia. Her cause and manner of death was undetermined. Law enforcement's initial theory was that Kaysera was drunk and just laid down and died, which for obvious reasons didn't sit well with her family or most of the public who firmly believed that there was more to this story. When I covered Kaysera's case, I spoke with her Aunt Grace, who said the police had given her family almost no answers. They wouldn't even confirm or deny if Kaysera's body had been wrapped in plastic when she was found, if her phone was checked, or who'd been interviewed, including Natosi. But Grace was hopeful that with a new sheriff and county attorney being elected, there might be some movement in the case. And in 2024, there was. Not a solve, but movement. In August, Bighorn County prosecutors announced charges against a man they say bought alcohol for Kaysera and 2 others, as well as chased them down in his truck. Now, the media isn't really naming this person, but it seems extremely likely that it was Natosi, and this person is currently facing 2 counts of criminal endangerment. I really hope that this is one step in finally getting some type of justice for Kaysera. Anyone with information is asked to contact Bighorn County investigators at 406-665-9780. Our last update is in the case of 22-year-old Mercedes Vega from Tempe, Arizona. Her case was featured in episode 147 on January 11th, 2024. Mercedes' case is definitely one of the most talked about episodes I did this year. It's just extremely horrific, and her mother and friends have done an amazing job keeping her name in the spotlight. But as a brief refresher, on Sunday, April 16th, 2023, Mercedes was attacked and abducted from the parking garage of her apartment complex in Tempe, Arizona. Her vehicle was found behind one of the most popular restaurants in the city near Mill Avenue, but Mercedes was not in it. She was found deceased at approximately 1:15 a.m. on Monday, April 17th, 2023, 60 miles away near Tonopah, Arizona. She was in a vehicle off the I-10 freeway that had been lit on fire. The medical examiner determined that her death was a homicide and that she died from a combination of burns, smoke inhalation, blunt force, and being shot. There was also bleach found in her throat. It was absolutely brutal. Now, Mercedes had been captured on camera leaving her apartment complex and being abducted. So everyone was thinking that there had to be more evidence, likely more video pointing to whoever may have done this. But authorities were keeping information very close to the vest. They weren't telling the public and they weren't telling her family. But then, finally, in November 2024, they announced an arrest made in the case. 22-year-old Sincere Hayes was arrested in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and is now facing multiple charges, including first-degree murder. He has since been extradited to Arizona. He's also facing charges of kidnapping, armed robbery, and auto theft. And authorities have said to expect more arrests to follow, and I truly hope that that happens. Of course, this case is still active, open, and unsolved. If you have any information about Mercedes Vega, please call Silent Witness at 480-WITNESS. As far as a call to action for this episode, I just want to ask you again, like I do in most episodes, please continue sharing these cases. It is extremely difficult, if not actually impossible sometimes, to pinpoint exactly what breaks a case. What information got to the right person to produce a certain type of lead? Of course, from there, it's a little bit easier to track. This lead came from this person, leading to this solve. What I'm trying to say is you never know if your share, that one share to this audience that maybe you think you don't have, is going to reach somebody who then shares again, who shares again, then it reaches the right person. So please continue talking about these cases. Please continue to share unsolved cases. But as always, thank you, I love you, Happy New Year, and I'll talk to you next time. Voices for Justice is hosted and produced by me, Sarah Turney, and is a Voices for Justice media original. If you love what we do here, please don't forget to follow, rate, and review the show in your podcast player. It's an easy and free way to help us and help more people find these cases in need of justice. Welcome to the Secret After Show. The studio door is open and our emotional support puppies are in the room. Of course, first I just want to say Happy New Year. I know that by the time this episode reaches you, it will be 2025. Let's hope this is the year where we see a lot more solves. I also, in the tradition of talking about what's going on with me, I want to say thank you for understanding that I have been sick. I was first told I had the flu, and apparently that turned into pneumonia. So it has been a crazy, wild ride. I'm still not 100%, but I am so much better than I was a few weeks ago. So I just wanted to say thank you for your patience. Thank you for understanding. I think so many people are sick. It's unreal. But, my job is my voice. So when that goes out, when it's affected, it is really hard. So thank you. I also wanted to let you know that I finally got my Dark Truth of Boeing episode out, which I was so excited, but I did have to delay because I was sick. And I just want to say that I love doing the Dark Truth series over there. If you haven't seen it, I do a lot of like scandals, conspiracies. It's under that justice umbrella of really either things that interest me or, in all honesty, just kind of piss me off. But I get to show a little bit more of my personality because I'm not talking about cold cases. I feel it's more appropriate to show my personality in those episodes, most of those episodes, versus here. So it's just a little different. And I really enjoy doing it. And I think I want to start working on an episode about United Healthcare, because I am very interested to see what happens next. I don't want to talk too much about Luigi here in this after show. I'll probably save that for the United Healthcare episode, but I think it'll be an interesting topic to dive into. And I do have United Healthcare, so please don't tell them, because I would like to remain insured for the year of 2025, especially while I have pneumonia, perhaps until I can find another insurance agency. But overall, that's what's going on with me. Of course, this after show is going to be very different just because I'm not talking about a single case. So the next thing I had on my list was just to say thank you. Thank you so much for showing up week after week, or, whenever you come by to listen to an episode. I'm not going to judge you. People are busy. Maybe you binge a bunch in one day. Maybe you come back every week. I don't know. I just want to say thank you for listening and kind of go over the highlights of this year. One, Media Pressure Season 1 launched. Oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. Media Pressure Season 1 launched and hit number 1. And not only is that exciting because like hitting number 1 and like beating Alex Cooper is absolutely insane to me. It feels really good, obviously. But 2, that was my goal with Media Pressure. The reason it needs to be successful, that I fought so hard to make it successful, is so hopefully every case that we feature on that feed will get escalated, will be elevated, I should say, to the media height that a case like Maura Murray has been at. That's the whole goal of the feed, to mix in these very well-known cases that have been impacted by media pressure, as well as these cases that need media pressure. So this was like a great experiment. Not everyone loves hearing true crime from people involved, I know. But I, for one, think if you can't get enough of a case, why wouldn't you listen to it from a family member, no matter how you feel about the case? But again, the theory was just proved, and that felt amazing. So thank you so much for listening to Media Pressure, for sharing it. And please make sure you're subscribed because right now we have more than one season on the slate for 2025. Of course, later in the year, another big one for me was being the keynote speaker at True Crime Podcast Festival. It was the only podcast event I did all of 2024, and I got to meet so many of you lovely people out there. So I just wanted to say thank you. It was also really cool to overcome my fear of being a keynote speaker. I was shaking. I wanted to throw up before going on stage. And what I did in this speech was I very much modeled it after how I want Alyssa's season of Media Pressure to be. It was more from my point of view. There was more emotions in there. It wasn't like I typically cover true crime cases. And of course, I feel I have that extra space to be personal because it's my sister. It's more appropriate for me to do it there versus in a case where I don't know the family or the victim. So I did this kind of like soft launch of how I wanted to present Alyssa's case in Media Pressure. And it was really well received. I should say that. That's very important. People really liked it, or at least told me that they did. People were crying. It was very eye-opening to me because I wasn't sure people were going to like it. I think I'm one of those people where I launch something, cross my fingers, and kind of think everybody's going to hate it. But of course, you guys came in clutch and were very, very kind about it. I also want to say there have been so many delays in Alyssa's new season. And a lot of that is because I am waiting for records. I am waiting for records. And if you are from the Phoenix Police Department or whatever agency I've requested records from, that's not going to stop me. I also want to say that. But I am waiting for some records. I'll give you guys an example. I requested records from the Phoenix Police Department and finally got them 18 months later. So that is the typical turnaround I found with the Phoenix Police Department. They just take for freaking ever. I can't tell you the reason. I'm not going to speculate or conspiracize about it. But that's been the biggest delay is I'm waiting for a little bit more information because I do want this to be the final project about Alyssa, at least in podcast form. Which, of course, I want to say the next thing on my list to talk about was the documentary. Alyssa's documentary premiered on Peacock in October, and that was crazy. Most of you were extremely kind. I've never had that big of a media push for Alyssa. I mean, at least not a really long time. So it's just, I don't know. This year, I feel like I'm like just now finally bouncing back after Alyssa's trial. At first, and I did a few interviews saying this, like I felt this huge weight off my shoulders after the trial. It was kind of like, what more can I do? And then reality started setting in, I think. And, I became deeply depressed. I got extremely exhausted after the trial. And it was really hard to stay in the true crime space. I'm not going to lie. It was just a lot of sadness all the time, and it didn't help me in my healing process. I'm so glad I did. Helping people is a form of healing. It was just a lot at once. Alyssa's trial happened, then we started filming the doc. We went right into media pressure season 2, or season 1. It was all good things. It was just a lot. But overall, I do want to say that I am extremely grateful to be here. I can't believe, you guys, it's been 5 years. It'll be, oh my gosh, 6 years in July that I started this podcast, that I started making my own content in true crime. So again, I do want to say that I am extremely grateful to be here and have so many people care about Alyssa, care about Maura Murray and Julie telling her story, and all the other cases I feature. So overall, thank you. I do want to say that in 2025, my goal is to change things a bit with these updates. I do want to get them to you more quickly. I just think being a little bit more timely makes more sense with these updates versus waiting till the end of the year and piling all of them together. And I did start this a little bit in 2024 this year. I did Suzanne Morphew and a Madalena Kojikari update. It's hard. So I think it'll be another mix of these dedicated update episodes when there's enough information to do, at least like 10 minutes maybe. And then when there are shorter, smaller updates, maybe I'll bring them back for a 2025 updates episode. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Like, for example, even I would like to go back to Harmony Montgomery and do a dedicated episode on her case, her mom's lawsuits. Let me know what you guys respond to best. This is information I want to make sure that you are getting in a timely manner, especially for these unsolved cases, and I would love to get your feedback. But overall, I have a lot of good things planned for 2025 here and for media pressure, and maybe some unknown projects that have not yet been announced. I did have a little something for our segment of hope, and I just wanted to say that for me, for the overall 2024, is you guys. that people like you care enough to listen and share. And I know I harp on that all the time. I just think it's so powerful, so important, and sometimes it's downright magic. But as always, thank you, I love you, and I'll talk to you next time.